But I find the best kind of wisdom is the one that you tease out of people. So I tell my brother, who's obviously highly insensitive as a result of, everyone knows now that I'm talking about it. And I go, mate, I'm feeling a bit overweight. I'm feeling a little bit like I've let myself go a little bit. And he goes, yeah, well, maybe eat a few less pies, fatso. And then I go, oh, okay, thanks, mate. Yeah, good, no worries. Lots of judgment, lots of telling me what to do, not a whole lot of moving the needle. But if he says to me, well, what do you think you should do? Like, it's no good when you're feeling like that. You want to get on top of it. No worries. What do you think you should do? I go, I don't know. Maybe eat a few less pies. Maybe eat a few more salads. Do that sort of thing. And he goes, yeah, great, fantastic, great way to do it. Because then now I own that idea. It's my idea. Makes it a lot easier to execute then because I thought of it. It's my thing. It's wholly my thing. And so I'll be like, all right, that's a good idea. Good conversation. We can keep on. Now, something that I've always struggled with is a little bit of like over-helping, where I've just said a great idea, but then, you want to add a little bit extra. Yeah, you could eat a bit more salad. You could also do these 5 things. And then all of a sudden that idea is not mine anymore. So we try and encourage people to not over-help. Don't have a breath, take a moment, listen. If it's on the right track, you say okay, and you'll get your chance to over-help a bit later on because we want to follow up. So in a couple of days, I see my brother, he goes, how's the diet going? And I go, literally eating pies every day. I didn't think you were going to check up on me. I didn't think you were going to ask anything. I didn't think you were paying that much attention. But today I'm going to go get a salad. I'm going to do that thing. And the following up is super important because it lets people know that you're in there with them. It lets people know that you're paying attention, that you care enough to show up, you care enough to check. And a lot of people sort of miss that bit because you have the conversation, you have this moment, you impart your knowledge, and then you just let it go and you assume the best is going to happen after that. But the following up is really important. And I was giving a workshop one time and someone asked me how I do the follow-ups. I said, well, I put it in my calendar. So I'll call Vicky. I put it in there, check in with Vicky 2 days after we've just had this conversation. And someone said, oh, is that a bit disingenuous? Like you're not really caring if you've got to put it in your calendar sort of thing. I said, well, the caring bit is that I put it in my calendar because 3 days ago it was like December the 10th, 2019. And then boom, now we're in February and it's that easy to forget and run out of time and do those things. And when I call Vicky, I'm not like, hey, my calendar reminded me to check in with you, but it's a great way to remind you to check in so that you can follow up and then sort of begin that process. And if you started doing the things we talked about, then I might get a chance to do some of that over-helping, finally get on top of the stuff I know about, tell you all about it, get stuck in, which is a really good way to sort of, move the needle for people. But this idea that you can have one conversation with someone and that's it, they're sorted forever, no matter who you are and where you are, is a little bit of a challenge. One of the reasons that I think it's so important that we sort of promote ongoing, long-term, slightly less sexy, but real consistent impacts around mental health is because when I was a kid, we grew up in a pretty, I suppose, once were warriors-esque type situation. I had a father who battled alcohol, drug, depression. He was, they call it bipolar now, but at the time it was manic depression, and there was a lot of violence, and there was a lot of drugs, and there was a lot of challenge, and we didn't have money, and we didn't have food, and my pants didn't fit, which now would have been sweet because no one's pants fit anymore. Everyone's showing off their ankles, but at the time that wasn't a cool thing to have, so my ankles were showing, and that wasn't great. And so we had this sort of situation at home, which was pretty unstable at times and challenging. And I think when your dad tells you that he loves you, but then he punches you in the face, you start to consider what people say a little bit less than what they're doing, and it starts to matter that people show up. And so just by virtue of luck that I happen to live in this particular place and go to this particular school, just down the road from me, there's another family of people, and I went to school with their son from prep, and we went all through year 12 in the same class all the way through, and their parents, his parents, wonderful people, still married, still hold hands when they walk down the street. It's really cute. They're wonderful. I still go there for dinners, every couple of weeks, and they just showed up. No one really knew about this stuff that was happening at my house. We didn't talk about it because in primary school you don't talk about it, and then in high school you're too cool to talk about it, and it sort of started to pass by then, and because dad had left, and so these guys were showing up. They'd feed me, probably cost them about $20,000 in food over the lifetime of just eating every leftover and doing these things. One of the things I remember being like a novel thing was they put the food on the table and you just help yourself. And in our house, you got given what you were given because otherwise it would have been a bloodbath at dinner time. So I'm sitting down going, well, there's just schnitzels on the table. Like, how many can I have? And as many as you want. You're like, I'll eat 12. Like, is that okay? Like, eat 12, you know, if you want to do that. And so every day we just showed up and they were great and Nick's great. And obviously we're fantastic friends and, you know, it was in his wedding party. And still that wasn't the whole difference. You know, they kept showing up and doing those things. And then one day we did the Deb and Nick and I did the Deb together. Well, not like together, but, you know, with girls and together at the same, yeah. So we did the Deb together. And my mum was very concerned that I would turn out like my father. And she did a great job, but it's very stressful, single mum with no money and a big boisterous, you know, man in the house. She only had sisters. She went to a girls' school. She'd never seen what a teenage boy looks like. And a teenage boy with no dad can maybe look like a guy who's going to go down the wrong path, a bit too big, bit too noisy, a bit too aggressive. And she was really concerned about that. And so she was saying I couldn't go to this party afterwards. And Greg, my friend's dad, he said, no, let the boys go. They're sensible boys. They'll be okay. And we were nerds. We're in the accelerator class. Like, we're not talking about, you know, we're not like going out partying all the time or anything like that. So we went into bat for me and we went. And it was great. I did any sensible 14-year-old boy would do. I got drunk. So Carlton Cold still tastes like high school to me when I drink them. If they're at a party, yeah, I can see it. It's a bit like that. And so he comes to pick us up in the morning. And I don't really remember the party. I vaguely remember the Deb. You know, my hair was terrible. And occasionally I show people pictures. I have a big afro. And we're driving back. But I remember this drive. I remember where we were. I remember the car. It was a Fairlane. I remember the seats. They were great. And Greg was in the front seat driving, obviously, and Nick was in the front seat sitting. And I was in the back in the middle, and we're sort of chatting and driving along. Don't remember what we were chatting about. But in the middle of it, he goes to Nick, goes, mate, you know, you did a great job yesterday. It was really good. I'm really proud of you. And he turns around sort of the back seat, not fully, but he turns around and he goes, and Josh, mate, we're really proud of you too. And I don't know if it was my first hangover or that kind of hormone soup that you're in. I don't think it is because it still gets me now and I'm well past puberty at this point in time. But that moment was just like at a time when I was getting in a lot of trouble for being a teenage boy and I was struggling with, you know, my father was trying to give me drugs and do these things and mum was trying to keep me on the straight and narrow. I'm trying to do well at school. I'm trying to make friends. I'm trying to do all these things. And you're battling whether or not you're a good enough person or you're doing the right stuff. And just to have someone who shows up every day, went to work every day, looked after his family every day, looked after each other every day, who knew me since I was this big, say that, made a huge difference at that particular moment. And it's not the first time someone told me they were proud of me. I was lucky enough to be pretty good at footy, so I got told lots of nice stuff. I did okay at school, so I got told good things there. But he'd earned that opportunity to have that one moment that just shifted the needle. And that bit, that 14 years or 13 years of work beforehand, is the bit that people miss when they talk about this. You earn that opportunity and you've got a chance to earn that opportunity every single day when you show up for the people around you. If someone else just randomly off the street came up to me and said they're proud of me, I'd say it's very nice, but it's not going to speak to my soul. And I think what we miss is that privilege that we have every single day to rock up and show up for the people around us and pay attention and keep setting a good example so that one day when we say something, it makes that kind of difference for people. But we can't just walk up and do it. You've got to put in the time beforehand. And I think it's really important that we sort of emphasize the importance of putting in that time and being consistent and acting with integrity so that we get that chance in the future. So my whole life now, the Just Be Nice project is about trying to build those environments for people, environments where people are supported to show up every single day, to look after each other, so that when the opportunity arises, they've got that chance to make that real difference and that they have the resources available to then fill in the gaps where they otherwise might be missing them, whether it be food or accommodation, books for school, clothing, whatever it is, that people don't get left behind and they're well resourced enough to show up every day and look after the people around them so that we can improve that equality of opportunity for everybody. And I think that is a privilege that I have to do this, to do it every day, but it is a privilege that anyone who gets to talk to anybody every single day gets as well. And I would encourage everybody, obviously, to lean into that today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the year, wherever they see the opportunity, and to just sort of keep on, obviously, just being nice. So thanks very much for your time today.
Josh, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
And I've always said this, that one of the solutions to housing is getting one of these, you know, very wealthy people to give you a warehouse where they can put 100 people so as they don't sleep on the streets, right? And I've always had, I know there's HR shit and everything like that that comes up with this stuff, but have you approached any of the guys, the Pratt Foundation, all those sort of people to try to get at least that sort of scenario?
Yeah, so there's a few interesting ways. There's a couple of different kinds of housing solution. And so what we do is we're really, and in everything that we do, we're really focused on developmental opportunities. So you've got early housing, so crisis housing, someone needs it in a hurry. Then you've got fully subsidised, in free place to stay, to mildly subsidised, you know, less until they're independently paying the rent wherever they are. There are a couple of challenges with that. One is if we put it all in one spot, that has to be the place where everyone goes. So if we put that warehouse in Ravenhall and your family or you've been kicked out of home in Dandenong, they'll send you there and you'll be away from your support networks and opportunities around there, which becomes a real challenge for people. The other thing is that people want to build extra housing, but let's say we spend $500,000 and we build a house and we put a family in it, let's say for 10 years. So that's 500, let's call that 500 weeks of housing. Now, if I took that 500,000 and I made it $500 a week of subsidies to help people where they are, staying in their communities and develop them, that's 1,000 weeks. So the difference in how we spend the money and how we manage it, and if I keep you in your house because you've fallen on tough times at $500 for the first 6 months, down to 4, down to 3, down to 2, and now you're paying, because we're also taking responsibility for your employment outcomes and your mental health outcomes, then obviously it gets cheaper and we get more than 1,000 weeks out of that same money, keeping you supported in a community where you already are. So there's a couple of different things. Where we need like a big space to keep more people is where it's a space that used to be occupied more by, for want of a better term, the insane asylums. They closed them down because people were treated terribly and it was a terrible place. But they didn't replace those with somewhere else for people to go who are suffering from really, really long-term issues. And so if we had a safer hospital space, almost like a nursing home where they're treated well, but you can be a bit drunk, but you're clean and you're not falling asleep behind cars and you're not running around on the streets, and we've got time to start working with you. If we've got somewhere to put you for your mental health medication to kick in, which for some medications is 30, 60, 90 days before we even get you to a place where we can have a conversation. I would really love to see those kinds of facilities put together, because the drain on resources from those people in a dollar fashion, like far outstrips like what it would cost to do these sorts of things. There are regulars that go and sleep in hospitals every single night, at a couple of $1,000s a night. And it would just be so much cheaper to if we had a transitional place like that, where people were on top of that taking time to transition them back into fully subsidised, less subsidised housing, a chance to contribute.
So how do you get financed?
So we work with partner organisations. So an organisation says we want to do good, we want to look after our people, or we want to look after the community a bit better. And we basically come in and say, don't tell us what you think you can do to help, tell us what you're really good at, tell us what you're doing every day. We will identify resources that we can use and how we can manage that in a way that benefits you guys and integrates into your day-to-day business. And then we pull that with everybody else and all our other resources, and we manage those out. So at the moment, if you wanted to do good, you might say, line up charities and go, who's the most important charity? But if you were going to build a house, you wouldn't line up all the tradespeople and go, who's the most important tradesman, and give all your money to the plumber and hope the house was built. You come back, the plumber did all the plumbing, and you go, okay, they get 5 stars. They technically did everything they said they were going to do, but you're not left with a house. What you do is you get a builder in who manages everybody in and out until the outcome's met. That's what we do. So we go.
So tell me, who are some of your partner organisations? Are they the big boys? Or?
Yeah, there's some big boys. So we've done work with Australia Post and Telstra, Simply Energy. We've got pilot programs going with them, KPMG, but also owner-operated cafes, community groups, working with local councils, and obviously we work with non-profits as well to help augment their service where they might do one thing, i.e. be a carpenter. Well, we make sure that everyone else is doing their stuff around them as well, so that we can get complete outcomes. We just want to keep people doing what they're really good at all the time. So raising the standard of care for people at this end, but also giving people a chance to contribute at the end of their hard-earned skills. So accountants, for us, we never have accountants working in soup kitchens, for instance. They're always doing accounting.
So where do you find the needy? Where do you find, do they come
Your
to you?
clientele, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do they, how do they know about you, and why would they go to you and they're not going to go to the Salvation Army? Or
Yeah, totally.
Mason?
Yeah. So there's, unfortunately, there's a lot of needy. We've got about 2.9 million Australians live below the poverty line. So it's about 1 in 10. Then another couple of million just on the other side of that. But we're about 1 in 5 people that can use help at some point in time. We use our partner organisations as conduits to people. So, for instance, our real estate partners, if someone can't pay their rent, we consider that a sign of economic distress. So before they get kicked out, we go in and see if we can keep them in there, work out what's going on. Whereas every other intervention only happens when you're properly homeless. You know, we've got the energy companies, and the programs put together with them is identifying at-risk customers and using economic uplift to get them to pay their bills as opposed to debt collection measures. So finding out where they're at, trying to improve their situation so they can pay their bills. And so even just between that, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of hardship customers on electricity in any utility company, essentially. We're talking millions of people that need help. It might be an organisation like a local government. They're really good because their mandate is traditionally to just look after people, not a specific thing. So they will be like, we've got these kids, we've got a great youth service. They've got support workers as youth workers, but they don't have access to maybe training for employment or a pathway into that, or just a chance for work experience. So we'll fill in the gaps around those people. The challenge is not finding people that need help. The challenge is having the resources to help everybody that
One
needs
thing,
help.
Josh, have you ever thought of something like saying, well, look, ICMI will put up in $20 a week to help with the electricity bill for a particular person, and getting 10,000 people that would do that? Or is that too much slow?
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. And we have a subscription service, but then what we do is we say, look, that person who maybe needed $20 a week, we're trying to transition people to independence at all times. So some people, it might be a 6-year journey, and some people it might be just a month or a week, depending on where they're at. So what we try and do is build our resources up, and then we meter them out how we see fit. It's kind of like in a hospital. The only reason you wouldn't get seen is if the beds are all full. And they say, sorry, you've got to go somewhere else. But if you came in with a broken leg, they don't go, how'd you do it? And you go, snowboarding. And they go, well, that's stupid. Why are we snowboarding? We're not looking after your leg. We don't do snowboarding broken legs here. So our whole MO is we get the referral at the moment. Ideally down the track, people will just be able to contact us directly and we'll be able to look after everybody. But the moment we get a referral, so someone calls me up, says, I've got someone here, Vicky, she needs a hand with this, this, and this. They're in this place. What do you reckon? We've got a couple of assessment tools that we use in that space. If we've got the resources, we say, no worries, give us the details, we'll get in touch and we'll get started. If we can't finish the job, we just say, sorry, man, we can't do that. And one of the reasons we do it like that is because if Vicky is on her 10th time of needing help or trying to get help, every time you reach out for help and don't get all the help you need, your trust is damaged in the system. And when your trust is damaged, it gets harder to lean into it and you don't start to do the work you need to do as well. And that's a huge challenge because people get bits of help, and when it doesn't get finished, they're just like, what's the point? And then even if I do come to Vicky and we have the resources, but she's been let down a few times, sometimes we find we've got to just keep showing up and being around for 6-8 months before they even go, all right, well, I believe you're around now. And now we're going to get stuck in.
And how many people do you have in your organisation?
So we have a pretty small organisation. There's only 7 of us at the moment. But because we leverage the partners, so every accounting firm that with 30 people, they used to do, let's say we've got this accounting firm, 30 people, they used to do a day in the soup kitchen, which is not really relevant to what they do and kind of a bit highly disruptive even to their day and all that kind of stuff. We'll take that, call it 10 hours off each of them, we'll call it 300 hours. That's 300 assessments that we get, financial assessments, which is obviously a real critical first part of working out how to work with people. On average now, that's like someone every single day going through the place. So now their goodwill is just happening all the time. But they're also being exposed to different kinds of challenge that isn't just visual. It's not just a homeless person that you don't have a whole lot in common with. It's someone comes in like, my husband's left or he's put my head through a wall and I'm struggling, and they're like, oh, I've got 2 kids, me too. We go to the schools, we maybe sound a little bit different, but we go to the same footy team. And now I'm actually getting an understanding of a whole other context of where people are at. So then my expectations of the help start to change as the accountant. And that's something that's really important to us, that we change the way that people help people, to understand that it's not always simple. It does require a long time sometimes. It does need multiple touch points. There isn't one generic great answer for everything. But the best thing you can do is do what you're good at. Because if I try and do that financial assessment, I'll be at it for 20 minutes and get nowhere. And you'll have it done, wrapped up, neat bow. And because you're operating in a space you understand here as an accountant, I've got more energy to put into understanding you as a person. Whereas if the whole thing's foreign, then I'm concentrating on this and I'm trying to work it out, and it becomes a real challenge.
So it's the same thing with Orange Sky Laundry, for example. They go around and people have showers, so they talk to them for hours. So they, they're getting to know them as well, which is the other thing that everybody wants.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
and some people have it. So we break up the help into two kinds: human help and logistics. And human help is like having someone there who cares and needs to, is around for you. Often it's a family member, sometimes a youth worker, sometimes a friend, whatever. And then it's logistics, which is having the stuff that you then need to actually finish helping someone. So you've got a mum who's like, I care so much about my kids, but I don't have access to the food, to the training, to the school, to the transport. So what am I to do in that case? I can't just care more and fix it. And for us, it's like, great, well, it's really hard to actually find someone else to care 24/7, but we can start to fill in the logistics around that. And so what we find is the people that have time to care, or often it's sort of not always the case, but time rich, resource poor, and the people who are resource rich are usually time poor. And so we can find a balance in the middle there that allows all those things to be taken care of. And that's really important, because it empowers the people who are the youth workers, the parents, the cousins, the friends, to then go, as long as I just keep showing up and caring, then the other stuff will keep happening, and I get to be the consistent bit that keeps encouraging them along. Sort of like if you're having chemotherapy, you might be sitting there, you're passed out, your friend's there holding your hand, and they're there the whole time, but doctors and nurses and staff and cleaners, they're all coming and going. There's not necessarily one consistent person. They're all required to deliver this outcome. And this person here is helping me. I'm passed out one day, oncologist comes in and goes, how's he going? He said, he's been sick 4 times today, he's really under the weather. And then he goes off and goes, all right, we might need to adjust something. That's what we're doing at JBN. I'm going, how's this son going? He's kind of gone a bit off the rails. All right, let's see if we can find these things. I'll get back to you with that. It's not always on the person who's struggling to come up with the answers, because they're in the middle of struggling, but it's really hard to substitute in that human help. And people burn out if they don't have access to the rest of the stuff that they need.
Wow. Oh, wow. No questions?
No.
Sorry.
Sorry,
just a quick one. You're doing keynotes. You mentioned workshops.
Yep.
So, what's your preference?
Oh, look, either way, there's a few, because we sort of cover a handful of those outcomes across those things. It depends on the organisation and what they're after. Workshops usually a bit more in depth, and might be around particular elements of what we deliver. So it might be around mental health, might be around diversity, might be around development in the workplace and developmental opportunities, impact literacy just in general, those sorts of things. Workshops are great because they're more interactive and we get to get stuff done. But so then people are often looking to speak with different people and deliver some stuff as well. So.
And schools, you want
schools, yeah, absolutely. So we do lots of work with schools, and also with schools like this is just on the internet, isn't it? Yeah. So like if it's a public school with no money at all, that's usually we just go do it, and we usually charge the independent schools that. It sort of balances out that way. Yeah. So we don't work with people Scotch and Melbourne Grammar and all those kind of places as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
It's okay.
We'll see.
Thanks so much, Josh, for coming in. I really appreciate it. It was enlightening, wasn't it? Yeah.
Really good.
No, thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody, all the business people.